Yeah, that was Nothing on You with B.O.B., my first song that I ever released.
At 39, Bruno Mars finally addresses the rumors. For nearly a decade, Bruno Mars was trapped in the ultimate golden cage. Night after night, under the blinding lights of Las Vegas, he gave the performance of a lifetime, while a dark rumor quietly paralyzed the music industry. Was one of the world's greatest hitmakers drowning in massive casino debt? Now, the silence is officially broken. The man who wrote the world's most beautiful love songs is about to expose a reality nobody saw coming. This is the truth behind Bruno Mars and the real price of Sin City, the man behind the magic.
Can I get everybody in the building singing this hook? Videotape it and send it to God. Send it to God. Here we go. Everybody.
There is a version of Bruno Mars the world knows by heart. The rhinestone suits, the slicked back hair. The voice that bends between funk and soul and pop with the kind of ease that makes other singers want to quit. The footwork that belongs in a different century. The smile that makes an arena feel like a living room. That version of Bruno Mars has sold out stadiums on 6 continents, collected 15 Grammy Awards, and written songs that people play at their weddings, their funerals, and every complicated moment in between. That version is real. It is also a costume. The man underneath has spent the better part of 30 years making sure you never see him too clearly. He gives you the performance. He gives you the record. He gives you the hook that lives in your head for a week. What he does not give you is the truth about what any of it costs him. And for a long time, the world was content to take the music and ask no further questions. Then the questions started, and once they started, they did not stop. Peter Gene Hernandez was born on October 8, 1985, in Honolulu, Hawaii, into a family where music was not a career choice, it was the air. His father, Pete, was a Puerto Rican percussionist who led a band called the Love Notes. His mother, Bernadette, was a Hawaiian singer and dancer of Filipino descent. His uncle played in the band. His siblings performed alongside him almost before they could walk. The family act was called the Love Notes 2, and young Peter was the centerpiece of it by the age of 4, not because anyone pushed him onto a stage, because the stage was where he made sense. He was performing Elvis impersonations in a Honolulu hotel by the time he was 4 years old. He appeared in the 1992 film Honeymoon in Vegas as a child Elvis. He was, from the very beginning, a performer playing a performer. There is something worth holding on to in that detail. A boy who learned to be seen by becoming someone else first. His mother died of a brain aneurysm in 2013, at the peak of his fame, and he has said almost nothing public about it since. That is the kind of grief a man carries in silence, because he does not know how to carry it out loud. The woman who gave him the music was gone, and the world kept asking him to perform. So, he performed. He moved to Los Angeles at 17 with a head full of songs, and no real plan beyond the belief that someone would eventually hear what he heard in himself. That belief took years to pay off. He signed to Motown Records and was promptly dropped. He spent several years as a behind-the-scenes writer, crafting hits for other artists while his own career stalled in the hallway. He co-wrote Billionaire for Travie McCoy. He co-wrote Nothing on You for B.O.B. He was feeding the industry songs that made other people famous while he waited for his moment. That waiting shaped him in ways that still show. There is a discipline to Bruno Mars that does not come from confidence alone. It comes from having been invisible and knowing exactly how fast that invisibility can return. Every note is placed with intention. Every live show is rehearsed until the spontaneity looks effortless. Nothing about what you see on a Bruno Mars stage happened by accident. The man behind the curtain is a perfectionist who learned the hard way that the industry does not reward talent, it rewards readiness. The moment came in 2010. Just the Way You Are arrived and the world stopped. It was followed by Grenade, then Marry You, then a debut album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, that turned him from a songwriter with a promising single into something closer to a phenomenon. The Grammys followed. The world tours followed. The kind of fame that changes not just your address, but your entire relationship with ordinary life followed right behind. And through all of it, from the very first moment the lights found him, he kept one thing sacred. His private life stayed private. Jessica Cabin came into that private life in 2011. She was a Puerto Rican model and actress who had won the first cycle of Model Latina and built a career in fashion and television that existed entirely on its own terms. She was not a celebrity girlfriend chasing a spotlight. She was a woman with her own industry, her own reputation, and her own reasons for keeping things quiet. Together, she and Bruno made a rare kind of couple, the kind that attends the right events, stands in the right photographs, and then disappears back into a life the cameras never see. For 13 years, that arrangement held. While other celebrity relationships played out across magazine covers and social media timelines and very public breakdowns, Bruno and Jessica were simply there, present enough to be real, private enough to be protected. The fans loved that about them. It felt like proof that something genuine was possible in an industry built on performance. Here was a man who wrote the most romantic songs of his generation and apparently lived that romance quietly, away from every lens that wanted to capture it. But quiet things have a way of breaking loudly. By late 2024, something had shifted. The anniversary posts that once appeared on Jessica's Instagram were gone. The joint appearances had thinned to almost nothing. Insiders were talking, and the internet was listening. And sitting beneath all of it, unaddressed and growing heavier by the day, was a separate story about a $50 million debt and a 9-year Las Vegas residency that suddenly looked less like artistic passion and more like something else entirely. The man who had spent 30 years making sure you never saw behind the curtain was about to have the curtain pulled back for him. And what people found there surprised everyone. The rumor that broke the internet.
You know, I don't hold any grudges against Motown. I was just really young and I feel like I didn't know. I didn't know that you can't, it's not like...
Las Vegas has a way of making legends and swallowing them whole. The Strip is built on spectacle, on the idea that anything can happen behind those doors and nothing that happens inside ever needs to leave. For 9 years, Bruno Mars made that city his home. Night after night, suit after suit, sold-out show after sold-out show, he stood on that Park MGM stage and gave audiences everything he had. It looked like devotion. It looked like a man so in love with performing that no arena in the world could hold him the way that one room could. Then, someone started asking why. December 2016 was when it began. Bruno Mars announced a 2-year residency at Park MGM in Las Vegas. The announcement landed like a celebration. Here was one of the biggest stars on the planet choosing intimacy over enormity, trading world tours for a single city, a single stage, a single commitment. Fans flew in from across the globe. Every show sold out. The residency became an event, a destination, a reason to book a flight to Nevada just to say you were in the room. 2 years became 3, 3 became 5, 5 became 9. He performed over 100 nights at that venue before walking off that stage for the final time on New Year's Eve 2025. What had started as a 2-year arrangement stretched across nearly a decade of his life and career. And for a long time, nobody questioned it. He was Bruno Mars. He did what he wanted. If he wanted to live in Las Vegas and perform for the rest of his life, that was his business. Until 2024, when it became everyone's business. A News Nation report landed like a grenade. According to sources cited in the story, Bruno Mars had accumulated a $50 million gambling debt with MGM Resorts. The residency, the report suggested, was not a creative choice. It was a financial arrangement. He had not chosen Las Vegas. Las Vegas had him. The story spread faster than any of his singles ever had. Within hours, it was everywhere, on every entertainment platform, every gossip account, every group chat where someone had ever hummed Uptown Funk without knowing all the words. The reaction split immediately into 2 camps. There were those who refused to believe it, who pointed to his track record, his discipline, his carefully constructed legacy, and said the story made no sense. And there were those who suddenly saw 9 years of Vegas residency through an entirely different lens, who looked at every sold-out show and wondered if the man on that stage was performing for love or performing for survival. MGM Resorts moved quickly. The company issued a statement describing its relationship with Bruno Mars as long-standing and rooted in mutual respect, and declared that any suggestion of debt was completely false. It was a firm denial, delivered in the language of corporate confidence. It should have ended the conversation. It did not end the conversation, because the one voice that could have truly silenced the noise said nothing. Bruno Mars, the man at the center of the entire storm, did not call a press conference. He did not post a statement. He did not sit across from a journalist and set the record straight. He went quiet in exactly the way he had always gone quiet, completely and without explanation, and let the world say what it needed to say. That silence landed differently than it ever had before. In the past, his privacy had felt elegant. It had felt like the choice of a man too focused on his craft to bother with tabloid noise. But in the middle of a $50 million debt rumor, the silence felt like something else. It felt like confirmation to those who wanted it to be true. It felt like pain to those who didn't. 2 years would pass before he finally spoke. And when he did not choose a microphone in a television studio. He chose the one place he has always told the truth. He chose the stage. 10 years of silence and presence. There is a particular kind of torture reserved for the truly gifted. It is the weight of what came before. Bruno Mars released 24K Magic in 2016, and the world received it like a gift it had not known it needed. The album was sleek and celebratory, and drenched in the kind of unashamed joy that popular music had been quietly abandoning for years. It debuted at #1. It sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. It won Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards in 2018, along with 6 other Grammy Awards that same night. 7 Grammys in a single evening for a single album. Then he walked into a Las Vegas residency and did not release another solo album for 10 years. The world noticed. At first, the silence read as patience. He was a perfectionist. He was taking his time. He was not the kind of artist who released music on a schedule to satisfy a quarterly report. He would come back when he had something worth saying. That explanation held for a year. It held for 2. By year 4, it had started to develop cracks. By year 7, people had stopped waiting and started eulogizing. The conversation shifted from when is the next Bruno Mars album coming to whether Bruno Mars as a solo artist was ever truly coming back at all. But here is the part of the story the headlines kept getting wrong. Bruno Mars was never gone. He simply refused to be alone. In 2021, he emerged alongside Anderson, Pac as one half of Silk Sonic, a collaboration so effortless and so perfectly realized that it felt less like a side project and more like the truest version of both artists. Their debut single, Leave the Door Open, was not a hedge or a placeholder. It was a masterpiece of old soul romanticism wrapped in modern production, and it spent weeks at the top of charts around the world. At the Grammy Awards in 2022, Silk Sonic walked away with 4 awards, including Record of the Year and Song of the Year. Bruno Mars was not hiding from success. He was collecting it under a different name. The collaborations kept coming. He worked with Lady Gaga. He lent his voice and his instincts to projects that kept his name at the center of popular music, without requiring him to stand alone at the front of anything. And then in October of 2024, he appeared alongside Rosé of Blackpink on a song called APT, a collision of pop sensibilities that became one of the most globally streamed songs of the entire year. It topped charts in Japan, Austria, Germany, New Zealand, the Philippines, Switzerland, and Indonesia. It was inescapable, it was enormous, and it was not a solo Bruno Mars record. Look at the pattern long enough and a shape emerges. He was orbiting, close enough to the sun to stay warm, far enough away to avoid the full heat of expectation. Collaborations carry a built-in safety net that solo albums do not. When something goes wrong on a collaboration, the responsibility is shared. When something goes right, the glory is shared too. For a man carrying the weight of a 7 Grammy night, sharing might have been the only way to keep moving forward without the ground giving way beneath him. Then came the Instagram post that changed the temperature of everything. In July of 2025, Bruno Mars joined Rosé on stage during a Blackpink show in Los Angeles. The crowd lost its mind. The performance was everything the internet needed it to be. Afterward, he posted a video clip from the show to his Instagram and wrote in the caption that he was almost out of debt. The words were followed by playful phonetic spelling and affectionate chaos aimed at Rosé. It was funny. It was loose. It was the first time he had touched the gambling rumor with anything other than silence. Unpack what that post actually did. It did not deny the debt. It did not confirm it either. What it did was something more sophisticated than either of those options. It told the world that Bruno Mars was aware of every word being said about him, that he had read every thread and every headline and every comment, and that he had chosen to find it amusing rather than devastating. That is not the posture of a man in crisis. That is the posture of a man who is in control of his own narrative, even when the narrative appears to be controlling him. But the post also cracked something open, because once he acknowledged the rumor at all, even in jest, the conversation shifted. The question was no longer whether he knew what people were saying. The question became what he was actually going to do about it. An Instagram joke is not an answer. It is a preview, and his audience had been waiting long enough to know the difference. Underneath the debt story, quieter and more devastating, the other rumor was still breathing. Jessica Cabin's 3 words, cheering from afar, had settled into the cultural consciousness in the way that only truly ambiguous statements can. Nobody knew what those words meant with certainty. Everybody had a theory. The anniversary post stayed gone from her Instagram. The joint appearances stayed absent from every red carpet. And Bruno Mars, the man who had written more convincing love songs than almost anyone alive, offered nothing to fill the silence his relationship had left behind. 2 absences running parallel. No solo album for 10 years. No public relationship for what felt like just as long. A man who had built his entire career on the language of love and longing was apparently living in the middle of both, with nothing to show the world except sold-out residency nights and a joke on Instagram about a debt he may or may not have owed. Something had to give. And in 2026, everything did. The stage becomes the confession booth.
To win your heart, you could set the
Bruno Mars launched the Romantic Tour on April 10th, 2026, at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. The same city, the same desert air, the same skyline that had watched him perform over 100 residency nights and carry every rumor the internet could manufacture. He did not avoid it. He walked straight back into it with a stadium tour, a #1 album, and something to say. The venue held over 50,000 people. Every seat was filled. Anderson, Pac was on stage beside him when the moment came. The 2 men who had spent years making music together as Silk Sonic were back in the same room, and the crowd was already at a fever pitch when Pac leaned into the energy and made a comment about debt and emotion that was clearly designed to open a door. Bruno Mars walked through it without hesitation. He looked out at 50,000 people and said he was debt-free, and that he had paid the casino off a long time ago. Then he grinned like a man who had been saving that line for exactly the right room. The crowd erupted. The clip spread across every platform within hours. Understand what those 2 sentences actually were. They were not a press release. They were not a legal statement or a carefully worded denial drafted by a publicist at 2 in the morning. They were a live, unscripted, fully public declaration delivered from the one place Bruno Mars has always told the truth. The stage is his confessional. The microphone is the only therapist he has ever truly trusted. For a man who spent 2 years saying nothing about a rumor that followed him everywhere, choosing a concert stage in Las Vegas as the place to finally speak was not accidental. It was deeply, deliberately him. Then look at what he named the album. The Romantic. A man walking away from a 13-year relationship. A man whose finances had been publicly questioned for 2 years. A man who spent a decade refusing to stand alone on a record. He named his comeback The Romantic. The first solo single in 10 years, I Just Might, became his 10th #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, his first solo chart-topping debut. The Romantic Tour sold out stadiums from Las Vegas to Wembley Stadium in London. When an artist names something after the quality the world suspected he had lost, that is not a marketing decision. That is a declaration. He was not just releasing music. He was answering every question anyone had ever asked about him without asking him directly. The debt, the silence, the relationship, the missing album, the 10 years of orbiting without landing. He answered all of it with one word on the cover of a record: romantic. What we were really asking all along. Step back from the headlines for a moment. Step back from the $50 million debt story and the Instagram jokes and the scrubbed anniversary posts and the 3 words that broke the internet. Step back from 9 years of Las Vegas nights and 10 years of solo silence and the #1 album and the sold-out stadiums. Step all the way back until the whole picture comes into view. What were we actually asking? Because it was never really about the money. A gambling debt, even one as large as $50 million, does not explain the depth of feeling the rumor generated. Celebrities carry financial scandals all the time, and the public moves on within a news cycle. This one did not move on. This one lived and breathed and grew for 2 full years, because it was never truly about the debt. It was about what the debt represented. It was about the possibility that the man who made loving sound effortless had been quietly suffering in a way nobody was allowed to see. The world did not want Bruno Mars to owe MGM $50 million. The world wanted to know if Bruno Mars was okay. That is the question underneath every question. It always is with artists who give the way he gives. When someone stands on a stage and opens their chest and hands you the most vulnerable parts of human experience wrapped in melody, you feel a responsibility toward them that logic cannot fully explain. You have slow danced to his songs. You have cried to his songs. You have sent his songs to people you loved and people you were losing and people you were trying to find the words to reach. He gave you the language for moments that had no language. That creates a bond that feels personal even when it is not. And when someone that close to your emotional life goes quiet, you do not just notice, you worry. The gambling rumor gave the worry a shape. The relationship's silence gave it a weight. Together, they built a portrait of a man potentially unraveling behind the very curtain he had always kept so carefully closed. And the public leaned in the way people lean in when they care, not with cruelty, but with the urgent, helpless energy of someone who wants to knock on a door they were never given the address to. Bruno Mars never gave anyone that address. Think about what his life actually contained during those years. The world was constructing its theories. His mother had been gone since 2013. The woman who sang to him before he could walk, who gave him the first language he ever truly spoke, had been absent for over a decade, while he performed songs about love and longing to millions of people who did not know what that absence felt like from the inside. He carried that privately, the way he carried everything privately, with his shoulders back and his stage presence immaculate and not a single word for the cameras. He and Jessica Caban built 13 years together in the quietest way 2 people in his position have ever managed. No engagement announcements, no wedding speculation addressed directly, no couples magazine covers. Just 2 people choosing each other consistently and without fanfare in an industry that rewards spectacle above almost everything else. When that ended, and the evidence suggests it did end somewhere in the long shadow of 2024, he did not grieve publicly. He did what he always does. He went inward. He went to work. He went to the only place that has ever made complete sense to him. He went to the music. The Romantic is not a breakup album in the traditional sense. It does not wallow. It does not point fingers or settle scores or use melody as a delivery system for bitterness. It does something more complicated and more honest than any of that. It insists. It insists that love is worth it. It insists that romance is not a young man's game or a naive man's fantasy, but a deliberate and courageous choice made by someone who understands exactly what it costs and chooses it anyway. That is not the work of a man who has given up. That is the work of a man who has been through something real and come out the other side, still believing. Consider what it took to make that album. 10 years of expectation sitting on his shoulders like a physical weight. The Grammy legacy of 24K magic, turning every blank page into a dare. The rumors. The silence. The relationship dissolving quietly while the internet watched from outside the window. The residency ending. The Las Vegas chapter closing. All of that compressed into a single creative moment that had to be worthy of everything it was answering. He delivered a #1 album. He delivered a #1 single. He delivered a sold-out global stadium tour that stretched from Las Vegas to London to Mexico City, across 78 shows and nearly every major city on Earth. At 40 years old, the boy from Honolulu, who learned to perform before he learned to sit still, proved that the silence had not been emptiness. It had been a long, patient, private act of rebuilding. And on the opening night of the Romantic tour, standing on a stage in the city that had tried to define him by his debts, he looked out at 50,000 people and made a joke, 2 sentences, a grin. The crowd on its feet, that was his press conference. That was his statement to the world. Not a denial or a confession or an explanation, but a performance. Because that is who he has always been and who he will always be. The man who plays a performer playing a man finally let both of those things be true at the same time. There is a lesson buried inside this entire story that has nothing to do with celebrity and everything to do with what it means to be a person moving through a life the world has decided belongs partly to them. Bruno Mars never owed anyone an explanation. Not about the debt, not about the relationship, not about the decade of solo silence. He owed his audience music, and eventually he delivered it. He owed himself honesty, and eventually he named an album after it. The curtain was never hiding damage, it was protecting the process. And when the process was finished, when the album was done, and the tour was booked, and the stage was set, he pulled the curtain back himself. On his terms, in his language, in the only room that has ever felt like home. Some men answer with words. Bruno Mars answers with performances. And this one said everything that needed to be said. He was never lost. He was never trapped. He was never unraveling behind that Vegas curtain while the internet rewrote his story without his permission. He was just getting ready. Bruno Mars spent a decade being talked about and almost no time talking back. Then he let the music do what he never would. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and drop your thoughts below. More stories like this are on the way, and you will not want to miss them.